For the final address of CPAC Australia 2023, please welcome founder Andrew Cooper and CPAC USA Chairman Matt Schlapp.
Hey, CPACians!
Hey!
Have
You
we
guys are
had
still
a
here?
Yeah, this is great, isn't it?
It is great.
We're out there going, is it empty out there? This is great. Good to see you. Now, we're going to change this up a little bit. Matt, we're going to sit down and have just a little bit of a chat, and I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I get asked about you and American politics. So
It's a deal.
Let's do that.
Can we first give Andrew a round of applause and all of his team for putting on a great event? Great hotel, great space here, really great speakers, very thoughtful. So thank you, it was awesome.
Well, thank you for that. But as we all know, there's just so many people involved in this. It's ours. It's yours. So, Matt, would it be fair to say that you would consider yourself a friend, or certainly friendly, with President Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I took over CPAC in America 8 years ago. So literally right when he was thinking of running for president, right before he came down the escalator and announced for president, I had a meeting with him. And I'm 55. I said earlier I'm 55. And I remember him because my parents were both born in New York City. And so when we lived outside of New York City for a while as a kid, Donald Trump was a big deal then. And then as I got older, he was kind of always a big deal. And so I had a chance to meet with him. He supported CPAC for a long time. And I was like, I'm going to go ask Donald Trump for a whole big pot of money, which is a huge mistake. Because usually rich people get rich because they don't give away all their money. So anyway, but it was fun. It was a great meeting. If you have time, I'll go into it. But it was so interesting.
Yeah. Now,
I did not. Who said? He was very generous, but no, I did not get the big pot of money that I thought I would get. But I left learning a lot about him.
I do recall being, and I can't remember which year it was, but it was some years ago, being at a CPAC in DC, and he was in the beginning of one of his 2.5-hour speeches, unscripted, off the cuff. As
I track his speeches by how many times I have to go to the bathroom. And one year, I had to go to the bathroom twice. And my wife was working for him, and she had his script in front of her, which does you no good to have the script because he doesn't follow it. And I was like, gosh, is he almost done? Is he almost done? And so I finally was backstage. I was waiting for him. He gets done, 2.5 hours. And I said to him, it was just he and I. He comes off the stage, and he's giving it everything. He's sweaty. You know, he's really... it's a lot of energy to do that. And I said to him, I was like, hey, have you got to go to the bathroom? He was like, no. And I'm like, what does he have, like a catheter or something? Like, I've had to go twice. He's older than me. It's amazing. It's like, maybe he's not human. I don't know.
Well, that's a good question, isn't it?
It is a good question. And then I asked him, are you going to go back to the White House and take a nap? And he looks at me a little disdainfully, and he goes, I don't take naps. I was like, okay. I would have to take a nap after 2.5 hours.
I do remember that year. There was another year, I think it was only a 2-hour speech, so it was like Alan Jones, he cut it back.
Yeah, right.
And I do remember, though, as a President Trump, of course, the Secret Service lock it down. And once you leave the venue, you can't get back in. Once you leave to go to the bathroom, you can't get back in. So I just remember looking around, and there's all these men, like doing this, like trying to keep themselves under control, just to squeeze another 5 minutes out of the president's... Yeah,
it's rough.
President's speech. Another thing I recall, and the security around President Trump's, or I guess any president's appearance at something like that is just unbelievable.
It is,
you know, helicopters in the air, you've got the Secret Service, you've got the state troopers, you've got, I think there was Army there at one stage.
Yep.
It's just incredible, people. It's amazing, and, you know, just to think that that expense must be, you know, borne by the American people to keep your president safe is just quite incredible, isn't it?
Well, you realize how people like that are putting themselves on the line too, right? You can see what our legal system, I use that term loosely, in America is trying to do in a very corrupt fashion, very coordinated by the White House, I believe. I think that'll come out, and trying to get like every layer of government to put them away. And then you have this question of violence, which, you know, it's amazing. We had this 4-hour riot at our Capitol around all of this election malfeasance. And, you know, the reports that came out were 4 or 5 people had been murdered essentially at this January 6th event, and all this other stuff. And then, you know, you just realize how many times you're getting misinformation. You know, the cops weren't killed by these protesters. People can like or not like protests. The right doesn't tend to like protests. We like more orderly, mannerly ways to say our piece. But, you know, these are pretty serious things they're doing to us. And Black Lives Matter, of course, burned down every major city in our country, the largest property damage in the 250-year history of our country. The now vice president took to Twitter and said, let's all raise the money to spring these criminals out of prison for the ones that were violent and were arrested. You know, cops were assaulted. A cop in St. Louis was murdered. Pretty serious stuff. And, you know, what we don't understand is we don't get told in our country is that, well, what's this insurrection, right? Well, I figured out what an insurrection is. It's when a conservative is really upset about what's happening. They're guilty of insurrection when they take to the streets. When Black Lives Matter took to the streets outside the White House, I infiltrated the crowd, actually with Laura Ingraham, who works for Fox News, who's a friend and a wonderful person, and she wanted to get down there and see what was really happening. And they had to take the President of the United States out of the White House and put him in a bunker, like you would if you were at war, because they almost pierced the security at the White House, the protesters did. I could see how hateful it was. I mean, it was from here to that back wall of very rough-looking protesters. And once again, we can have the argument as to whether or not in a free society you can do those things. I don't think you should be able to take bricks and hurl them at cops. I think that's inappropriate. That's not free speech. That's a pretty violent action.
It's assault.
It's assault. And so when the President of the United States has to essentially be taken to a bunker way underground that was built for, like, you know, if the White House was going to be bombed, but yet you can have 4 hours at the Capitol, and they have 1,000 people in prison who have been convicted. They said they're going to double that number or match that number with new convictions. Same people that are trying to get Trump for raising questions on the election. So, you know, it's as bad as you think in our country right now.
Yeah, and so that they're charging and jailing many people, but of course the number one person they want to get is President Trump himself. And we haven't got time to go through all the legal issues he's got himself, or not himself, but what they're attacking him with. But as a man, as a person, it does seem remarkable to me that he seems to still cope. He has a coping mechanism. Something like this, I've been through a few court cases in Australia here, one with the High Court, and it's very draining, it's very oppressive, and it's hard to function properly, and yet he still seems to be generally on the top of his game. Is he remarkable? Is he unusual in this respect?
You know, as I said, my wife worked for him for almost 4 years at the White House and at the campaign, and she was always taken aback by his energy level, his enthusiasm. You know, he's a full tilt kind of guy all the time, in. What do we got to do? What do we got to do? And as far as the legal things are concerned, you know, Mercy and I have checked in with him almost after every one of these legal things. And I don't really tend to bother him a lot, but just to check in. And you know what you would do with someone you respect is, well, the first thing that's amazing is he's the leader of the free world. And, you know, I have his cell phone number, so that's usually the best way to get him. The staff doesn't like that, but I usually just call him. And no, I won't give it to any of you. But Mercedes, like the car, but she's even better. But but he picks up, you know, and he says, "Hi, Matt, how are you?" So it's like I'm always kind of shocked by that, because it's like that's how available he is. He's kind of like, presidents just don't tend to act that way. People who have had these important jobs, they tend to get behind a wall and they have a cocoon around them, and he's just broken through that at all times, which is one of the reasons why I think he stays so relatable to people. But at each one of these times, I just called to say, hey, keep your chin up, as if he needs to hear anything from me. And he immediately goes into an analysis of what he thinks is happening to the country. And what my takeaway always is the same thing, which is, Mercy and I have been through these legal things. You've been through these legal things. They do really get you down. Not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. They're expensive. We don't have tremendous personal wealth, so like they can really sink you pretty quickly. And it's a mental game. And Matt Gaetz told me that their whole goal is to make the process the punishment. So it's really, you're getting sued or there's a legal issue. It's not the issue that gets you. It's your psychological approach to all the bad things you think could happen around the issue that they use to their advantage. And how do I know that? Well, all of our big law firms in America, they're mostly global now, but they won't do any pro bono work for someone like me. I've always been able to get pro bono work. I always had some profile. I could always get prominent lawyers who liked me or liked the causes I worked for to help me. That's almost illegal in our country now. Now I can't even pay them $1,200 an hour. They won't take you as a client because you're these terrible things. So that's quite a shift. So they want to make the process the punishment. And what they're trying to do to President Trump is break the man. They literally want to break him. I think his son said they've spent $100 million on legal fees for lawsuits. He's getting hit because apparently they've used some campaign contributions to pay for lawyers. And during this conference, I took to Twitter and I just said, we all better wake up. Political contributions and political action, don't take it too literally anymore, because the left is going to use every power in their authority to break all of you too, to break your spirit. Someone said on this stage that, it might have been last night at the dinner, that they've already got us editing in our brain what we can and can't get away with saying. And we have to make sure that we don't fall prey to that, and that he doesn't fall prey to it. So, he has said to me on any number of occasions, he's given me personal and professional advice as CPAC has had challenges. And what I love about it is he's always available to talk about it. Like all New Yorkers, he has an opinion in like 10 seconds. I don't know. Do you all know any New Yorkers? They don't hold back. They've got opinions. But what I get out of him more than anything else is he's got this big, huge heart. He really cares about his country. And he's not like a sweet guy, but he cares about his country, and he wants to do, he's fierce about trying to save the country. And what he realizes is that the fight against him is just a proxy. The real fight's for the country. And they think that if they stop him, they can continue this transformation of America. Remember Obama said that? I'm going to transform America. Well, transform sounded okay. Transform, that could even be good. Make it better. That's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to make it much, 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 much worse. Make it like something it wasn't meant to be. And I think Donald Trump understands that if he gives in on this great fight and he allows them to take this billionaire and bleed him of his cash, because, a billionaire doesn't have $1 billion in cash. They have assets, and then they have cash as part of that. So they want to bleed all of his assets. They want to make it so lawyers can't work for him. So just so you know, there's an effort in America going on right now to go after any lawyer who agrees to work for Donald Trump or any of his allies. So it's very hard to find a lawyer who's willing to put up with that. Even lawyers who love you and think that you have a righteous cause, eventually those lawyers realize I won't be able to have a job anymore. So, our view, my wife and our view is, well, first of all, our oldest daughter, you'll like this, Andrew, Viana, I think she came with me here last year. She's great. She's a junior in college. And she told one of our friends that she was going to have to be a lawyer. And this friend of ours said, well, you really shouldn't be a lawyer unless you want to be a lawyer. And she goes, have you met my parents? I think we need a lawyer in the family. But it really should work that way. You should be able to go out into the market and get one,
It just occurred to me as you were talking, my legal problem is actually related to you.
I know it is. I was wondering when you were going to make me feel guilty. You're right about this.
Yeah. We all need lawyers.
Because they didn't want to give us visas.
So
when that first
those
CPAC.
of you, the first CPAC in 2019, I've invited these very charming man and a few other Americans to come and visit us in Australia for the first CPAC. And the bureaucrats, the geniuses in the Attorney General's Department deployed the Foreign Investment Transparency Scheme, which is legislation designed to stop Chinese influence in the Australian political system. They deployed that against myself, Ross Cameron, and Tony Abbott. And it was the first time they'd ever used it, and they eventually threatened me with jail if I didn't comply with these crazy requirements that were uncompliable, if that's a word. And the reason was, Matt, they thought that you were using your admittedly charming influence over me, and I was your foreign agent, or I was your agent in Australia. So
to me, this is amazing because how many lefties go to conferences around the world? It's all these people do, and you pay for it. They're going to all these fancy capitals, whether it's Planned Parenthood or the Green Agenda people, or our guy is Tom Steyer, does all this green energy. All you do is read about how they were in Brussels, or they were in Rome, or they were in Paris. They have all these conferences. Have you ever read an article about the fact that any of them need to register as a foreign agent? Have you ever read an article about how they're being brought up on charges or they couldn't get a visa to go into one of these countries?
One of the crazy things during the process of the court case, and eventually went to the High Court, one of the crazy things was that the chief officer heading up this division in the Attorney General's Department, Sarah, I can't remember her name, she was also a board member of a think tank called China Matters. So, it's just crazy, right? And she was in charge of deploying this legislation against Chinese influencers, and eventually came after me. Look, we can talk so much more about President Trump. Your experiences, my mind goes back to the travels you and I have done, going into Hong Kong at the height of the student protests. Maybe you can just share a little bit about that experience, which was something that's very dear to my heart, was seeing live, really, the fall of Hong Kong.
And Gordon Chang, who's still here, and his wife Lydia would call herself a Hong Konger. Her parents, I think one of her parents as well, and so we had started off in a couple of these countries. Jaiba, who was on your stage, yourself, me, Dan Schneider, you mentioned earlier. And these young kids, they're young, and they looked young. They had reached out saying, hey, we don't really want Westerners to come, but we wouldn't mind if the CPAC gang came and protested with us.
Well, if you recall, they also ripped off, Jay had invited a young Hong Kong activist called Andy Chan.
Yeah.
And Andy was flying to Tokyo to appear at Japan CPAC, and the Hong Kong police boarded the plane and pulled him out of his seat and took him back in. Arrested him, and that sort of annoyed us. It annoyed you, I know, Matt.
It annoyed it, but it also was it was a real wake up call, right?
It was. We knew something was serious going on there, so we all arranged to fly into Hong Kong.
Yeah,
and that was surreal.
It was surreal because I didn't bring my cell phone because they said, you were gonna get the attention of the regime in Beijing, which was infiltrating
President Trump's numbers on that phone.
That's right. It's true. And so I kept my phone behind. So you're entering into this hostile area, and you know what it's like when you don't have your phone. We're so used to our phones. So I took a piece of paper and I wrote down Jared Kushner's mobile phone number, John Bolton's mobile phone number, all these mobile phone numbers, and I put the piece of paper in my pocket, knowing that it was like the 1970s. I was going to now, if I was smart, I would have memorized the numbers, but I don't know how many of you, but 10 digits now seems like impossible to memorize. But when I was 8 years old, I had every number memorized I needed to know. So I kept that piece of paper, and we went to these two different protest sites. We talked to dissidents during the day, and at night, Lydia and Gordon would say, well, we found out through WhatsApp or whatever where the protest is, and do you guys want to go? And so we had this kind of moral question of, should we go? Would we make the protesters more dangerous? if we showed up, foreigners, so we'd have this conversation. And both times we ended up going to the protest, and they were scary. I think they were frightening things to be at.
That was very scary. If you recall the student protests, they used to organise themselves in WhatsApp, and they'd pick a location, and within half an hour they'd have thousands of students protesting, and the riot police there, they don't mess around. I recall us being at the front line trying to talk to people, and they're literally where those chairs are, just there with the gas canister guns, pointing straight at us. And I remember one particular time, Matt, you and Dan, it was pouring rain, and you put your CPAC umbrellas up. This is when I knew the power of CPAC was global, and the Hong Kong students flocked you. Yeah. They were all around you, and I think some of them were even trying to sing the national anthem of America. It was wonderful. It really was.
Yeah. The umbrella was quite a symbol, right, of the protesters. So they used it in a lot of different ways. So Dan had this idea that we'd get them emblazoned with our logo. And I remember we were across from the police station. Can't remember where it was in Hong Kong. And they have, the lights that are on the end of the rifles. Like there's a green light, I remember. And they were coming from all the windows at this police station, just aiming at the foreheads of these kids, some as young as 12, all dressed up as, we would say in our country, almost like in a ninja costume, all black, masks, not because of COVID, masks because of facial recognition, and bandanas and everything else. And so I'm much taller than most of them. I have this big white hair. I'm not dressed all in black and sleek. I think I had like a typical American. I had like a green plaid shirt on or something. And they kept coming up to me and they say, so many of these kids walked up and they said, in their broken English, and they would say, hey, are you that guy from CPAC? And I said, I'm the guy from CPAC. And they were like, thank you for standing here with us. So that meant a lot. And then, several came up to me. And then finally, this one young guy kept coming up to me. He goes, we're because they were using their technology, so they were communicating, hey, the CPAC team is here. And so this one guy came up to me and he said, are you sure you're the guy from CPAC? I'm like, yes, I am. Okay, that's great. He come back up. He was like, are you sure this guy? This is your name? And I was like, yeah. And then he comes up a third time and he goes, we're very worried about your safety. And I was like, I get it. I was like, this is not, I'd rather be somewhere else. And I was like, but it's the right thing for us to do to stand here with you. And he goes, no, you don't understand. We're really worried about your safety. When they start shooting, you have to run really fast. None of us think you can run fast. And I said, hey, buddy, I have short bursts of speed. I've already seen where the alley is. It's not that many yards away, or meters, or whatever you say down here. I was like, I know exactly where I'm running, so it's going to all be okay. But they were wonderful.
Yeah, it was truly inspiring. It was truly inspiring.
Wonderful. Talk about freedom lovers. I'm sure they'd love to be with us here today, and we should think about those people and all the people like Jimmy Lai, this wonderful businessman in Hong Kong, who we had dinner with the night before.
A billionaire. He could have gone anywhere in the world and lived a life that only some few people could dream of, but he chose to stay in Hong Kong.
He could have bought an island. He could have had a yacht take him there. He could have run his media conglomerate from safety, and he could have sent in messages, and he could have done a lot of good leaving too. I wouldn't have even criticized him for that, but he said, no, I'm staying. And he started to cry at this dinner. He was like, I'm never leaving. I'm not going to leave my people. And I said, well, what about your kids? He was a Christian convert, and I said, what about your kids? What are your kids going to do? And he said, well, my son is very impressive kids, right? Smart kids, went to good schools, impressive jobs. One of his sons was an investment banker. And I was like, well, what's he going to do? He said, well, last week he went down to the store and bought a black backpack and a mask and a hat. And he said that he is going to join this protest till the end. So that night they firebombed his house because we were there. So you begin to feel like maybe you're bringing even more pain on these people. And he's now in jail, and he's just a hero to freedom. And we should all pray for him and think of him.
Now, Jim, we have to continue moving on, but I just want to share with you, like I've had so many experiences in my short time that I've been involved with CPAC and you. I recall being at the demilitarised zone in between North Korea and South Korea with Matt Whitaker, and it's just like a special. I don't know whether anyone's been to that area, but you look over into North Korea and they have a little fake town, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what the authoritarians do. They'll jail billionaires, they'll crush student uprisings, they'll stop free speech, they'll impede all your personal liberty. Andy Chan, he got debanked. Forget Nigel Farage. Andy Chan couldn't get a bank account opened. No company would employ him. He was a smart young engineer, and his life is just kind of over. He's done. They don't care, these people. They will crush you. This is why we've got to stand firm in countries like Australia and
you got to go sooner. People keep saying, well, how bad could it be? There's going to be a point where, right? Don't you put that in your own head? At what point would I fill in the blank? And if I could leave you with anything at this CPAC, it would be, please stop thinking that way. Because this is the moment. You really can't wait any longer. If you wait much longer, and I put myself in the same category with you, I'm the father of 5 kids, I worry about the life that they're going to have. I worry about making their lives more complicated because people hate their father or whatever else. But if we wait any more time to really stand up and be a guardian of freedom, there will be no freedom to guard. This is the moment when we have to be successful in these countries. I mean, I know you have elections coming up that are very important. Your referendum is incredibly important. We have an incredibly important election in 2024. This isn't like a sports analogy anymore. Well, we'll do the best we can, Andrew. We'll dust ourselves off if we came in second and came close, and we'll get them the next time. I don't really think there's many more next times for Western civilization, for freedom, for democracy. So this is critical, and I think you all should know that everybody's watching what's going on with those folks who are fighting for freedom. When I get back to America, the first thing all of our supporters are going to want to know is what happened with everything Australia's gone through. We've heard about the lockdowns. We've heard about embrace of socialism, this idea of CRT being put into your constitution. They're going to know, what are they going to fight back? And I'm going to tell them the story of what you guys have done here. I think you've had a brilliant campaign, how the spirit of the Australian people is alive and well, how you're going to stand up for your country and for your history. And that isn't it ironic that they always charge us of the sin that they're guilty of, right? They're charging you with the sin of being racist and sinful and hateful when your history belies that. Our history in America belies that too. The party I'm a part of is the party that made slavery illegal, made sure former slaves had their full civil rights, made sure that former slaves had their ability to vote. And it was the Democratic Party, the left-leaning party, which is now the Marxist Party in America, that fought that at every step of the way. Fast forward to today on CNN, they're calling everyone like me a racist. And for a while, it was a gut punch, and I would kind of didn't know what to say. Just remember, it's a tactic when they do that. It's not because they care about fighting racism. Their whole history was to be racist. They just want the political power. And they want you to feel isolated and lonely and solo. And they want you to feel like if you speak up too aggressively, they'll be able to destroy the life that you might want to have for your kids. And if we all psychologically are able to blacken that out in our minds, all those fears, because all that is fear, drop the fear, grab the faith, work with each other. Think about what will happen if we save these values for the generations to come. It's like literally saving the world for the generations to come if you can be successful in this most recent challenge that you have. And I'd say, Andrew, the one thing I have as I leave these countries, terrible stories about Hong Kong, but I think those young people inspired so many more people to stand up against the regime in Beijing and all throughout that area, that dangerous neighborhood. And I think the message I will take back to America is Australians are stubborn and they're going to fight. And I hope the message that I leave with you is that Americans are good and decent and tolerant, and we are going to make America great again. And our two countries are going to work closely together to make sure freedom is alive and well all over the globe.
Yeah, fantastic.
We went overtime.
We've
cheated.
gone overtime. Yeah. They haven't brought the hook out yet, but we'll have to wrap up. I just want to, Matt, please join me. These sort of conferences, as you know, don't happen without a lot of hard work. And, the fight back you're talking about, really, the best place to start is with young people. People that have got the journey in front of them, those aspirations that you described. They're ultimately the beneficiaries that we're fighting for, right? And I don't know whether you've noticed, but there's been quite a few volunteers here at CPAC, and they're all pretty young. And I just want to bring them in. I hope they're there.
Did they already go to the bar? Here they are, over here. Smile, guys, it's over.
Yeah, please.
That's nice.
It's fantastic. Look,
good job.
These guys have been working so hard. And I know some of them are, up on Friday night at, 3:30 a.m. in the morning, working through, and then they're leaving at sort of, late in the evening on Friday night. And there was so many things that they've done. The whole crew, Matt, all the things that you do, flying all this way. I know you Americans, you're pretty good.
We complain
flyer.
a lot. Sorry about that. Andrew reminds me it's just as long to get to America as it is from America to here, so I have to remember that.
Yeah, you get that, right? The American that complains to you.
Down here, sorry. Yes. That's right.
So conferences involve a lot of people. The most important people at this conference, the most important people in this movement is you, because it doesn't happen without you. And freedom isn't protected without people like you. So everyone here, in my mind, is an activist. You've got to get involved. If you've got the time, get involved personally. If you've got the money, donate to CPAC, donate to IPA, donate to Advance Australia and the other great think tanks. And that's how we will stand our ground, and ultimately the rubber band will snap. It'll be stretched too far. Before we leave, I just want to also give a shout out to our great supporters at CPAC, the producers of this wonderful show and live stream that's getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, and that's Australian Digital Holdings, ADH TV with Jack Bulford. Please give it up for those guys.
Very good. And the Americans were going on your website to watch, so that's where they got to watch CPAC Australia.
That's wonderful. I remember talking to you about how you used to charge to view the live stream, and then you made a decision, and I followed your advice on this, is that you got to reach people, right? This content's fantastic. This content is subversive. It's dangerous.
It's subversive,
right?
For sure.
And but we got to get it out there into the hands. Absolutely, they're all with ADH TV. Look at them, what warriors too.
Very good.
So that's it. I'll leave you this one thought, right? We'll be back here, all going well, in a year's time. I want you to bring everyone here, bring one person with you. Preferably a little bit younger. Bring your kids if you can. Bring your friends. Come back here. Let's build this movement. Let's make sure we don't get swamped by the left and the woke. Good night, and thank you very
everyone.
much.
Well done.